Hello, my name is Roger Lemaitre. I'm the President and CEO of UX Corporation, and it's my pleasure to be able to introduce you to the cobalt nickel deposit we have at Westbar, Canada's only cobalt-driven cobalt project, and one of the few in the world today. We will be making some forward-looking statements, so I will ask you to review that very carefully before we go forward. In this presentation, my objective is to try to answer 6 key questions. Why is cobalt important to our future? What type of cobalt deposits do we find here in the province of Saskatchewan? Are they free from uranium? What are their key characteristics? Are there more of these to be found? And is UX sort of leading the charge into determining whether the Athabasca Basin is a world-class cobalt district? But before we do, I'd like to ask you, what are the key geochemical pathfinder elements that have been used in the Athabasca Basin by explorers to find unconformity uranium deposits? Traditionally, uranium, nickel, cobalt, arsenic, and copper. Oddly enough, all those elements have been used to find uranium, but no one's ever really looked at it at a different perspective and say, what if we use those same elements and the same information to find cobalt? People would drill a cobalt intersection in the past and use it to find uranium, and they would never follow up on it. But what if we use some of the uranium information on these more failed deposits and turn them into pathfinders for cobalt? And that's what we're here doing at UX. Before we get into the deep details on this, first question to ask is, why is cobalt important to our future? This slide here shows you projected forecast electrical vehicle sales, and there's no doubt that the future of cobalt and its growth and its demand is tied to the sale of electrical vehicles. Even the most pessimistic people who evaluate electrical vehicles and their potential sales are extremely bullish on electrical vehicle sales. And you can see that there's a planned 60-fold increase in electrical vehicle sales between today and 2040, all driven by government policy. They're looking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and subsidies that are going towards this. But even still, subsidies for the barriers to are all related to we're seeing drops from 1,000 kilowatt hours in 2017 for electrical batteries to $209 in 2017, and by 2014 expected to be cost competitive. We're seeing exponential increases in EV sales over the last 8 years. From 2011 to 2016, only 1 million total EV sales were made, but that pace was doubled only 17 months afterwards to the middle of 2017. In August, we hit 4 million sales, and we're hitting 5 million is anticipated to happen by February. And people who aren't believing in these sales should take a look at the 2017 first half versus 2018 first half sales, and you can see massive growth is happening. Adoption of EVs is happening faster than we anticipated. Cobalt is forecast to grow 17% on a compound annual growth rate over the next 12 years. And you can see there's your, on the left-hand side, the amount of cobalt that's going to be required to meet basically the growth in demand due to EVs. There's been a lot of talk out there about cobalt being eliminated from these EV batteries, and while it's certainly true that suppliers are looking of EV batteries are looking to reduce their reliance on cobalt, that's occurring for one main reason, and that's supply security and price concerns. Even still, cobalt is an essential portion of the batteries, even in these reduced or essentially eliminated cobalt batteries. You can see from the current NMC 111 and 622 batteries, cobalt's a substantial portion, and that could be reduced in the future 811 and NCA batteries that are not yet proven and on the road and proven to be stable. There's a lot of research yet to go from here, from the 111 to the NCA battery. But even with a reduction in cobalt use on a per unit basis of anywhere from 50 to 65%, the 60-fold increase in demand is going to more than make up for the reduced cobalt consumption in each particular unit. Cobalt growth is still considered to be pretty substantial over the next decade. Where does cobalt come from? In 2017, 111,000 tons of cobalt were produced, and 58.8% of that comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has significantly concerns for electrical vehicle producers. One, supply security, creeping expropriation, social responsibility, and ethical concerns such as child and slave labor and conflict cobalt is a huge concern for consumers today. And suppliers of batteries are trying to find ways to diversify away from the DRC. Also, an interesting aspect of cobalt production is 99% of the cobalt produced today is produced as a result of byproduct. So either nickel or copper production. So cobalt has been relatively inelastic to supply demand variations because of the fact that it's a sub or byproduct of other commodities. So switching to the next question, what type of cobalt nickel deposits are present here in the province of Saskatchewan? The U.S. Geological Survey has 10 primary cobalt deposit classifications. The top 5 here are in production or have been historically in production today, are more economically important. The sedimentary stratiform copper cobalt deposits that you see in the DRC or in Idaho are one of the prime producers worldwide. Nickel laterites as a byproduct also are nickel sulfide deposits like what you see at Voisey's Bay and Sudbury have also been an important source of cobalt. Our hydrothermally ultramafic associated deposits like you see at the world's only primary cobalt deposit production center in Morocco at the Bouazer mine is one of those. And then the 5-element vein type deposits like you see in cobalt produce a minor amount of cobalt historically. What our West Bear deposit doesn't seem to fit into any of these categories, and we have just recently termed the expression for this classification of deposit to being an unconformity related cobalt nickel deposit. So where is West Bear located? This is the Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan, and our project is located in eastern Athabasca, right in the heart of all of the historical work done in the uranium sector and all historical production. Zooming in a little bit closer, the West Bear project contains 2 deposits. The West Bear Cobalt Nickel deposit, which was discovered in 2013, worked a little bit in 2004 and 5, and then last winter we've resurrected it. We have a small resource there, but you're going to see it's wide open and it's very high grade. What's impressive from a shareholder point of view is that the discovery cost of cobalt today is only 50 cents a pound. Right now cobalt's trading above $25, and that doesn't include any of the value of the nickel credits that we can put in there. The property first came to attention of investors back in 1976, where the nearby West Bear uranium deposit was discovered, the shallowest undeveloped deposit in the basin, although it is relatively small. I just wanted to highlight to investors that UEX covers 65,000 hectares of ground in the eastern Athabasca Basin, right in the middle of the uranium district, but also where the emerging cobalt deposits are being looked for, in sandstone cover of way less than 150 meters generally, but in the areas around West Bear, less than 25 meters, meaning their sandstone is relatively thin, and we're looking at pittable deposits. So, next 2 questions. Are there cobalt nickel deposits in the Athabasca free from uranium? And what are their characteristics? People who've been following the Athabasca uranium deposits for years commonly see projects like Key Lake, Sioux, Midwest Lake, and many, many others, that there is a common association within the uranium deposit of cobalt and nickel of sometimes substantial concentrations. Because those are going through a uranium mill, uranium associated with these deposits make the cobalt and nickel valueless. So we need to find deposits that do not have uranium in it, and we've seen recently with what happened at Glencore. They had cobalt concentrate shipments stopped at their border at the DRC because of possible uranium contamination, making that cobalt concentrate valueless. And then we'll look at what are the key characteristics of the West Bear Cobalt Nickel deposit. 3 key things I wanted to bring to your attention. One, it's the only one cobalt-driven, high-grade cobalt-driven cobalt deposit resource in Canada, one of the few in the world today. We have very cheap discovery costs and really impressive growth potential within the deposit footprint itself. And finally, even in the immediate area, we've identified several opportunities for satellite deposits. First, what do we mean by cobalt-driven cobalt? Because so much cobalt is produced as a byproduct, the cobalt supply is unable to respond to changes in demand or price. And so what investors are looking for are cobalt-driven deposits where cobalt makes all the decisions. Production rates, investment rates can either increase or decrease production based upon demand for cobalt. When we look at West Bear here, this pie chart shows you the rough in situ value of cobalt in the deposit in blue versus other metals, which in this case is only nickel. And you can see that 89% of the value is driven by cobalt in situ, which means that as this project goes forward, Cobalt will be making all of the decisions with respect to how we optimize the development of this project should it prove to be economic. When you compare that to other deposits around the world that are in production or in development, you can see that West Bear fares pretty favorably compared to most of these deposits which do not have cobalt driving their economics. What excites us from our drill is the grades that we're seeing of cobalt we're seeing at West Bear. And highlighted in yellow here are several multi-percent over multi-meter intersections. Typical laterite or cobalt district deposit has about 0.1% cobalt on average in concentrations. Your Voisey's Bay and Sudbury type 6 nickel sulfide deposits only 0.03 to 0.09% cobalt. In the Democratic Republic of Congo and Idaho, the average is about 0.5%. A lot of the West Bear deposit intersections exceed 1%, and highlighted by her hole 12 there, 4.9% over 8 meters. There are several world-class intersections of cobalt by any standard in the world today, highlighted by our 2018 and previous drill programs. Last year, we were able to grow the little showing we had at West Bear cobalt nickel to a deposit that's still wide open for expansion. Currently, the deposit has a strike length of 225 meters. It's 2 to 35 meters thick, dips 5 to 25 degrees to the south, and goes 100 meters into the basement below the Unconformity. This, I just wanted to highlight to you the outline of our current wireframe. It's constrained by pit shell economics, so not all of the good resource holes are in that shell, as you can see. The intersections are color coded, so they point your attention to the orange, which is above 0.5% cobalt, and the red, which is above 1% cobalt. And you can see just on the southwest corner alone, there are 3 high-grade intersections, including the 4.8% intersection over 8 meters in hole WBC12 that don't sit inside the pit shell. They will be included if we're able to expand that deposit to the west, where you can see high-grade mineralization remains open for expansion, and towards the southeast as well. So we'll be back in here this winter drilling and expanding this deposit. When you look at a typical cross-section through the deposit, you can see that it looks eerily familiar to what people would see in basement uranium deposits. We have structurally controlled mineralization in clay hydrothermally altered rocks centered upon a structure within a graphitic peelite. What's interesting to note is that the grades seem to be increasing with depth. What we also note is that the mineralization at Cobalt, the deposit here shown in blue, is separated from the high-grade shell of the nearby West Bear uranium deposit shown in red. But they still sit within the same hydrothermal alteration system and structural regime, which is interesting because this is the kind of relationship that hasn't been recognized in the past. The alteration structural system remains open to the east and the west, and I'll point your attention to the far west here, where the alteration system is open-ended. There's another alteration system even farther to the west. Never seen a drill hole in the gap in between. Because we need to find cobalt that is uranium-free, we've done some mineralogical testing using ChemScan survey, which looks at things at a micron by micron basis. We submitted 5 mineralized samples and 1 clean sample, and what's really interesting to note is our mineralization is scooterudite. The cobalt's found as scooterudite, a cobalt arsenide mineral, which is commonly the same mineral that's found and exploited in Morocco for the primary cobalt deposit there. Nickel is found as a solid substitution in the cobalt and the scooterudite. We don't see, and it's clear from the scan here, even at the micron level scale, we're not seeing any uranium, which is fantastic. And we're seeing an interesting clay speciology in the alteration system surrounding the deposit. It's dominated by illite and chlorite with very low amounts of kaolinite dravite, and I'll explain why that's important here. in this slide. You can see that the spatial distribution of clay here, we have the alteration system, the uranium deposit and the cobalt deposit. When we look at the cobalt or the uranium deposit, we can see that the clay alteration is dominated in the sandstone within the deposit by kaolinite and dravite clays, and in the basement down dip by chlorite and kaolinite. Which is weird because in contrast to the cobalt deposit to the east here, the clay speciology is different and dominated by illite and chlorite. What that means and why it's important, we don't know yet. That's something we're going to have to investigate. What's exciting for us and hopefully exciting for our investors is this is a cross section through the uranium deposit located about 200 meters to the east of the cobalt deposit, or to the west of the cobalt deposit, excuse me. And in red is the outline of the uranium deposit. It's part of the resource today, of the uranium resource. Highlighting blue in each one of those drill holes is the assays of cobalt and nickel, and you can see that those assays extend well below the existing deposit, 5 to 10 meters. Unfortunately, using the technique that we used to drill these extremely altered rocks near the Unconformity, we used sonic drilling in 2004 and 5, 6. Those holes can only penetrate that deep before the drill was unable to push them any farther. So you can see that despite the fact we have cobalt and nickel in the uranium deposit itself in red, the cobalt nickel mineralization extends below. And why is that important? Because if we superimpose that section through the uranium deposit on a typical cross section through the cobalt deposit 200 to 400 meters to the east, we can see that the drilling around the uranium deposit only tested the shallow environment around the Unconformity. The grades of the blue in those blue drill holes there are similar to the grades we see at the top end of the dip of the cobalt deposit, and yet no holes are drilled down dip of the uranium deposit where we would expect to find cobalt. So we believe, and these shallow cobalt intersections below the uranium deposit occur upon every single set of drill holes across the entire length of that cobalt deposit. We're excited because we believe if we were to drill test the fault structure below the uranium deposit, we have great opportunities to expand by finding more cobalt. So if we took off all those holes that only went 5-10 meters below the Unconformity west of the cobalt deposit that didn't test the fault structure in the basement, you can see there are almost no holes, either on the plan view at the top of the slide here or on the long sectional 3D view down below. There are only 3 holes that have actually tested the structure, and all 3 of those holes are mineralized. The blue outline that you see there is taking all those cobalt mineralized holes below the uranium deposit, or at the uranium deposit, and putting them on the map and show you that there's certainly the cobalt system is still wide open to the west. We think it's got great potential for us to expand in that direction, where grades or the cobalt deposit are improving, and the alteration intensity is improving. Next question: are there more of these deposits in the Athabasca Basin? We believe so, and I'll try to show you. And is the Athabasca a world-class cobalt district? Well, you can see West Bear on the slide here. West Bear is on the south flank of a domal feature defined by strongly graphitic peelite, which is highlighted here in red through the geophysical imaging of electromagnetic imaging of that deposit. We've been looking across the basin, but particularly on our West Bear project, looking for situations and similar things that have been not recognized in the past that led us to the discovery of the West Bear Cobalt deposit. We're seeing several locations that are priority drill testing for us. Particularly want to highlight the area about 2 kilometers directly north of the West Bear deposit on what we call our Umpherville claims. You can see there's only been limited drilling hole. All these holes were drilled in the map here were drilled in the late 70s or early 1980s. We have exactly the same geological setting, structural setting as we see at West Bear, but untested. But the holes that are drilled there have encountered significant hydrothermal alteration, as highlighted in blue. They have also hit weak uranium mineralization. In fact, one of the holes, ML5, encountered 0.22% EU308 over 4 feet, and they tried to follow it up with holes 5 and 6, and both those holes were unable to drill in the down dip direction because they hit massive clay alteration. And back in the 70s, that was really hard to drill through for drilling. Technology hadn't quite advanced to drill through that material yet. And yet spot sampling across that entire 500-meter length of drill holes that we have alteration and mineralization has over 200 ppm nickel, but not as properly sampled as spot samples collected from just various rocks within the drill holes. There's not a single drill hole for a kilometer along strike to the east where the exact location structurally of the West Bear deposit is located at the north-south fault intersection, and even to the east of that area we're seeing anomalous nickel. Cobalt was not sampled on the West Bear property in the 1970s and 1980s, so we're using, where we find nickel, we're often finding cobalt. We don't know what the cobalt concentrations might be in here because they were never sampled. So while we've been able to answer 5 of those 6 questions, there are still many questions. Our work is trying to raise many more questions. First, where did this cobalt nickel come from? What triggers its deposition? Why is there a change in the clay speciology from the uranium deposit through the same system to the cobalt deposit? Does it have an important factor in forming these cobalt deposits? Is the cobalt nickel mineralogy an important factor in the separation from uranium? In most of the uranium deposits, the mineralogy of the nickel and cobalt is found in different minerals or cobalt nickel arsenides, and so with sulfur. But here we're seeing nickel arsenides. Is that an important factor for separation from the uranium deposits? Are there more of these deposits found in the basin? We believe so. We've demonstrated just a couple of high priority targets that we'll be looking for in the future. But the last question is the Athabasca Basin a world-class cobalt district? First, we are looking at a situation where we're finding very high-grade, world-class grade intersections. Yes, we don't have a world-class deposit yet, but we've only just touched the surface of it. It's in a great jurisdiction, number 2 Fraser Institute mining investment jurisdiction in the world, with world-renowned ethical and social responsibility issues addressed already. It doesn't take a huge deposit to make something valuable. To produce 1% of cobalt supply in the world today, you need to produce about 2 million pounds a year, and if you did that for 20 years, that would be considered a significant player in the business. That's looking at deposits only 40 million pounds, so we're already on our way to getting there. But probably more importantly, no one's ever looked for cobalt in the district. They've used the presence of cobalt to help find nickel, but never have they looked at it the other way around. UBX is proud to be leading the charge for cobalt in the basin, and we believe that the Athabasca has a great potential to be a world-class cobalt district. So for investors, I just wanted to shortly talk to you about our valuation. You can see here on the left side here, compared to our uranium peers, on the vertical scale, here is the number of pounds they have in their inventory, and the size of the dot is their market cap, and in words there, the market cap per pound, and UBX is coming in around 81 cents a pound, even though we have resources similar to our peers, and we're going to be seeing a resource increase as we get close to putting out our CHRISTIE Lake resource. When you compare us to our advanced cobalt junior companies, we look really good, but you have to realize that our uranium resource has a huge impact on our market capitalization compared to our peers. So it makes a pretty compelling investment story. Just to let we have 4 key pillars I think that we should be excited investors. We have substantial existing resource base in uranium and cobalt, 86 million pounds of uranium and growing. We have a fantastic property on our CHRISTIE Lake project with the new discovery at Aurora. We have the low-cost cobalt nickel deposit at West Bear with great opportunities to expand, and compared to our peers, we're relatively lowly valued. Just a quick corporate summary: our market cap is around 75 million pounds, or $75 million. Cameco is our 13% shareholder, and for investors who've been waiting to see the Global X rebalancing act. When it comes to UBX, they have rebalanced their portfolio to reflect the new selective index that they're going to be following here essentially immediately. So we don't expect to be the overhang that we've had on our sales has been eliminated. And just to introduce you to our exploration team, they've been involved in getting this in our board of directors. Thank you very much.